Go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody today to the North Central IPM Center Pests in Progress webinar series. Today, our webinar is titled Navigating the Waters of IPM Educational Training with Frannie Miller. I'm Lynne Jess, and I'm one of the co-directors of the North Central IPM Center. And we are one of 4 regional IPM centers that is supported by the USDA NIFA Crop Protection and Pest Management Regional Coordination Program. We're conducting this series to provide opportunities for project directors to report on their crop protection and pest management grants programs. Before we get started, I just want to let everybody know if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A, which can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then at the end of Frannie's talk, I will ask each of those questions to her. So again, just put those down in the Q&A. So we want to welcome Frannie Miller. Frannie is at Kansas State University, and she is the Pesticide Safety and IPM Coordinator. And while Frannie is speaking, I will post some links to her program in the chat, so you will see those when they come up. So Frannie, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So as Lynne said, I'm Frannie Miller. I'm the Pesticide Safety and IPM Coordinator for Kansas State University. And today we're going to be talking about navigating the waters of IPM educational training. So first off, this is just one of my favorite quotes. And so it kind of goes along with this: is a problem is an opportunity with thorns. And so we can kind of look at some of the situations that we've been in through the last couple years that have kind of maybe created some opportunities for us and maybe changed the way we look at educational programming for some of our programs. And so I just thought that kind of highlighted it. So as we looked to putting together our EIP grant and getting things ready, this kind of fell along with the theme that I was going, get ready to navigate. So when you're putting together programs, and we'll talk specifically about some of the programs that are in our EIP grant, but you have to expect that there is some navigation through some rough waters and some growing pains. Those can be technological issues. Those can be some internal issues, maybe within university systems, and we'll talk about those here in a few minutes. You have to really put together a core team and think about what you want, who you want on your team, how you're going to address those issues, and build from there. And then you have to also determine what components you need in a program or what area you're trying to address. And the thing that we kind of talked about is that there's no perfect ship when you're navigating through this, or no perfect situation. And so, you know, sometimes you might need a dinghy and sometimes you might need a yacht. And so what are those things that can make the system work for your specific situation? And then once you figure out what you want to do in your program, or how you're going to do that, you got to figure out how you're going to get there. So what are the options that I have in oars and rudders and different things like that? So I'm using this analogy of a navigation for boats, but really for our program, it was figuring out how we're going to get there. Due to the pandemic, we had to shift, and so kind of we had to go from in-person programming or things that we used to do to go to virtual programming. And how do we shift on a dime, and how do we get there? And we learned real quick that we just kind of had to maybe try some things and then evaluate them and see where we could improve, because we were kind of trying to do that on the fly. So for our crew for this EIP grant for the 4-year cycle, we had people from the Department of Entomology, people from the Department of Horticulture, Plant Pathology, and Agronomy within our university. And so we had, of course, I was the coordinator, but we had Dr. Brian McCornack, Dr. Raymond Cloyd, Brooke Garcia, Robert Max Dunlap, and then Cheryl Boyer, Ward Upham, and Dr. Carrie Rivard. And then we had Dr. Megan Kennelly, Dr. Kelsey Unfro, and Dr. Sarah Lancaster. And so those made up our teams, and they're on there for specific projects that we're working on where we need specialist support or to take a lead on a specific project. And we'll talk about that further. So for our program, for the EIP grant for the 4-year cycle, or it was 3-year cycle, but an extension due to the pandemic to make it a 4th year. So within K-State's program, we chose to focus on the areas of agronomic crops. And you can see up there that that's My Fields program. It was kind of the program that is in there. And that's kind of a technological system that's used to be able to, like, it's by crop, and a producer can log into My Fields and keep track of his fields in there. We have an extension component where you can get all the different, basically all the different publications are in one spot. It's used for soybean aphid, basically reporting, and they're starting to build on this program also to put for crop, like our crop seed producers need to keep track of things. And so there's some applications that could be used further to make this better. Then we had the community section, and a lot of the things that we did were under that section. So our Kansas Roots website, where you can pick out plants that are good for Kansas producers or landscape, that's on listed. They're all listed on that site. We also have K-State Garden Hour, which came out we did it in 2020, 2021, and we've been really successful, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Pollinator health area, we really just focused on a beekeeping workshop. We had some other intended things that we were going to do, but due to some budgets and things like that, we had to scale down that area. And then IPM education for pesticide applicators, we focused on doing some online training. And then we also did some unique things that came out under that. We did an IPM card deck. And so we'll talk about some specific projects here on the next slide that go under this. So our program really has had some success on doing some unique educational efforts. So one thing that came out of, we hadn't initially maybe planned for this K-State Garden Hour, but due to the pandemic and, like I said, having to shift, we needed to figure out a way to reach our master gardeners, the public, and do some training. So we developed this webinar series to address consumer level horticulture, focusing on, we did sessions on insect identification, we did on landscaping, we did sessions on IPM, and we did sessions on, it's just different speakers across the state picked up and did a webinar over lunch hour. And it was extremely successful in 2020. And so from there, we decided, our program focus team in horticulture decided they wanted to continue it. And we've got a lot of data. We've got a lot of information from that has been, I think it's been extremely successful. And we've reached some new audiences where we wouldn't have had that opportunity. We did an IPM card deck. And so we kind of got the idea that we wanted to do something innovative with playing cards and kind of create a game. And so we went through and developed an educational card deck that teaches IPM strategies. And we made each suit one of the control measures. So the heart was the biological control, and we picked out pictures that represented that. And you guys can see down there in the corner is a picture of me holding the card deck. And we ordered 1,000 of those card decks, and we still have a few left, but we pretty much sold out of them, and a lot of the pest control companies like them. And we also made a game that we could teach at pesticide applicators training to kind of teach those concepts. One thing we had come out of some of our, like, as you were working through some of your projects and you sent, like, try to collect data from different groups, one of the teaching groups wanted, they said a huge need was they could teach a lot about insects, but they didn't have any really good resources or identification for spiders. So we developed a children's spider book, and that has been, we learned that it's hard to evaluate that. We put a bookmark in each book that was distributed to teachers across the state, and we didn't get a whole lot of evaluation data for that, but we do know that it's reaching audiences because people posted things on Facebook or different things like that. So, and then we also did insect art contest, because these art teachers and different things that we were talking with said that it would be interesting to have a statewide art contest. And so we kind of started out with, the first time we did it, we had a purpose that we were going to use the images in a different card deck. Since the first one was successful, we were going to try and make like an old maid card game using those images, and we promoted it that way. But then it's kind of then morphed into a themed contest in additional years. So those are some of the new innovative things that we did. Garden Hour, we have lots of evaluation data for Garden Hour. And so this is just some information. We had 3,955 registered Zoom users that registered for the Garden Hour in 21. We had 16,326 total participants. We tried to collect some more long-term data. So one of the things we had was 77% of the participants reported increasing pollinator habitat as a result of the webinar series. And then we asked them specifics about like reducing pesticide use in pollinator areas, selecting plants that provide season-long sources of food for pollinators. And so there's percentages that we have with each one of those. So some successes that we have for the program, I would say we've had successes in innovative programming. We developed, like I said, educational training materials using innovative technology and some new approaches and trying some new things. And I think we've been really successful with that. We were successful in being able to pivot to meet the needs. Like I said, due to the pandemic, we kind of had to change some things. We had to learn to use some new technologies, and we just really were able to be successful in making some of those changes. We continue to build on our technological systems to reach stakeholders and continue to refine those things, and it just continues to build. And we also have some success in creating opportunities. And like I said, we due to not being able to have things face to face, that allowed us to do our first online pesticide training and allowed us to see how that would work. And it was a good trial. Challenges, I'd say our challenges as a group are we collect a lot of evaluation data, but we don't always know how to communicate our evaluation needs. Like if you get an evaluation expert, we don't really know how to maybe communicate the science to them, and they don't really know how to maybe communicate the long-term effects that we're looking for. And so that can be a challenge. We have challenges in team stability. Of course, all of you, if you are working at a university, the replacement of staff is kind of limited, and we have, time and expertise that becomes limited because of that, because you're taking on other roles for other people. And so keeping a stable team is kind of a challenge. Maybe we had a little bit of challenge on completing the original deliverables that we outlined at the very beginning, because the current environment, dictated that we had to pivot and be able to adapt and change some of our ways of thinking. So maybe we didn't do a face-to-face in-person training. We did a webinar or something different to meet that need. We still met the need, but it wasn't exactly the way that we intended when we started. And internal systems are a challenge. We're required to use certain payment methods. We're required to, when we did the webinar series, if we wanted to charge or think about charging for things, we couldn't use certain systems. And so they didn't play nicely together with Zoom. And so you had to have people like register multiple times and things like that. And we also learned that, in the university system, sometimes things don't play very good together. So we had to kind of navigate some of that. So in order to have this crystal clear sailing, we had to chart our course. So every journey program needs to have a plan, goal, and objectives. We had to have tools and resources. Virtual training, we learned, requires a lot of reallocation of time and resources, and just it takes a lot more to get things done. People that don't work with us, that are outside, think that it's a lot easier to do a webinar or a Zoom, and it's actually not. If you're trying to like use it for pesticide training, where you have to keep track of people, it takes a lot more manpower to do that. The crew, we worked through learning our strengths and our weaknesses of the team, and maybe you have to look a little bit outside of the team to maybe, if you have a weakness, maybe you can look outside and see if there's somebody else you need to get them to join. And like I said, in a virtual format, it takes a lot more deckhands. I am the coordinator for IPM and pesticide safety, so that's only one person, and I would have to reach out and kind of make a team of people, extension agents, specialists, to kind of do a lot of those trainings. And then anticipate that there's a learning curve and adjust based on the situation. So prepare for the storm or batten down the hatches. And then the mainstays of training are just the crucial elements. So know your audience, know the platforms that you have, know your anchors, who your team is, have an engagement and validation plan. And then you have to communicate with your stakeholders. And that's a key piece. That can be done through, if you're doing it virtually, we almost had to handhold a lot of our stakeholders the first time we did a Zoom training or something virtual that they hadn't done before. It took a lot of effort to get them on board and to see that that might be a positive thing. And then docking in the harbor, just wrapping up the program as a whole. We had evaluation that we'd done, and how do we use that evaluation data to illustrate impact. If you're doing it virtually, you have program recordings, you have validation data. Where do you save that? How do you keep that? Those were all issues that we had for the first ever pesticide safety training online. We had to turn in credit hours for that. And so how did you track people and keep that all straight? Those were some things we had to learn and think about. And then communications with attendees, how do you, do that and keep it all straight and kind of go from there. And so with that, this is just my contact information if you guys have any specific questions about the K-State program. And if you have any questions, like she said, put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them here. So that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you, Frannie. That was great. As you said, if anybody has questions, please put them in the Q&A. I have a couple questions though. So what tools did you use when you conducted your online training and webinars?
We used Zoom as our main type of communication tool. And then because what I found, well, we also use Teams at our university too, but it seems like not a lot of our stakeholders had access to Teams. So that was kind of how we had to choose Zoom.
Okay. Did you use webinar for most of that, or just like Zoom meetings, or how did you keep people who you didn't want Zoom bombing type things happen?
We had registration, so everybody had to register, and we knew that, like we could see the registration list. We did it through, I'm trying to remember. Webinars is what we used for our pesticide applicator training. The meetings is what we used for some of our more intimate meetings. We used the meetings for that we didn't have to keep track of people. The webinars allowed us to track people on the backside, like you can use some of the additional things that are in there to keep track of people. So Master Gardener training, we used meetings, and the webinar, Garden Hour, we did the webinar type to try and help keep people from being there.
I have another question. Is there a plan to print more IPM card decks?
Yeah, we'll see if there's more need for them, and then we'll probably print some more. I've still got a box here, so if anybody wants any, they're available.
All right, thank you. So then another question is, what methods do you use when you collect your evaluation data, or how do you go about your evaluating the programs?
If we were doing it in a virtual format, so like using Zoom or whatever, we attach a Qualtrics survey to the backside of Zoom and have it automatically send it out right as as they log off, it'll send it to them. And then we'll send that out also via email to the list or later of participants. And then we also did some different, like for the Garden Hour specifically, we did like we're supposed to collect like data on age ranges and things like that. So we took what the university required and then added our own questions about impact at the end, and kind of did it that way.
Did you find that most people filled those surveys out? What was your success rate on that?
It kind of depends upon group. Like my pesticide applicators, a lot of them filled them out. The K-State Garden Hour, we had a lot of success with, but then like our master gardeners, that group didn't fill out very many. So it just kind of depends upon who you're working with, and also if you promote it, I guess, like if sometimes you could give an incentive for filling it out. And it also depends upon how many questions you ask. If you only ask 4 or 5 questions, they're more apt to fill it out than if you ask 15.
All right, thank you. And one last question, unless somebody else posts one right away in the Q&A, is what do you think makes your IPM program successful?
I think we've been successful because we have a team that works together. We've kind of learned our the way that we work together, and then we've kind of found our niche in several different areas that allows us to like change the way we. I think we kind of when I started 11 years ago, we kind of have changed the way we think about things long term. Like, when I first started, we spent dollars mostly on salary and things like that. And now we're kind of working towards building programs. And yeah, we still have to have some salary dollars because that's the people that we need to have the program. But we've started to like reach out into innovative areas.
Okay, great. We did have another question pop up in the QA, and it's kind of a two-part question. First one is, do you have examples of how you incorporated IPM into pesticide applicator training? And then did you incorporate IPM into training for all categories or only certain ones?
In our state, we're allowed to do IPM. So we could do identification of specific insect. We could do, we talked about like we had a speaker come and talk about IPM and talk about cultural controls and biological controls and all of that and how they could integrate that into like their landscape business. So you just have to think, how does IPM work for the pesticide applicator? We didn't do it in all categories. We picked some categories for which it was like, I usually always do IPM for right-of-way training because that's kind of one that's easy to integrate it into. Aquatics, you can kind of integrate that into there. So I kind of choose my categories based on, what, and it's the pesticide applicator category for us is such a small portion of the grant that we just do, just a specific amount for that piece.
All right, sounds great. Well, I don't see any other questions. And we're almost at the top of the hour. So I want to thank you again, Frannie, for your presentation. And I want to remind everybody that our next webinar will be on Wednesday, February 16th. And Anthony Hansen from the University of Minnesota will be speaking about their IPM project. If you want to learn more about the North Central IPM Center in general, you can go to our website, and that's ncipmc.org. If you'd like, we have a central issue newsletter that we do every month. You can find that on there and subscribe to that also. So again, thank you everybody for watching the webinar, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel when we get the recording done. Thank you again.